Night settles over the royal city like a held breath. Torches gutter along the corridors of the palace, their light catching on painted columns and the golden-laid doors that separate the inner apartments from the outer world. Somewhere beyond those doors lies the body of a king who has ruled for decades, a man whose victories were carved into stone and whose name was meant to endure for eternity. Yet on this night, eternity trembles. Power has slipped from the clenched fist of the throne and entered a far more dangerous space, the hidden chambers of the Pharaoh's harem. This is the story of sex, power, and murder at the heart of ancient Egypt. It is a story preserved not in rumor or legend, but in the stark, bureaucratic language of a trial record. The conspiracy that ended the reign of Ramesses III, one of the last great warrior kings of the New Kingdom. It is a reminder that even in a civilization obsessed with cosmic order, the most destabilizing forces often emerge from within the palace itself. To understand how a king could be struck down in the very place meant to guarantee dynastic continuity, we must first understand what the royal harem actually was. Modern imaginations tend to picture it as a place of idle luxury, sensual excess, and passive women. In reality, the harem was a tightly regulated political institution. It housed not only the wives and concubines of the king, but also their children, nurses, tutors, scribes, guards, and priests. It was a miniature court, complete with hierarchy, rivalries, and ambitions. Access to the king's body meant access to the future of the throne. Ramesses III ruled during a time of profound strain. Egypt had repelled invasions from the Sea Peoples, but the victories were costly. Grain shortages, labor strikes, and corruption gnawed at the foundations of the state. The old certainties of divine kingship were still proclaimed in temple reliefs, yet daily life told a more precarious story. In such an environment, succession was not merely a question of lineage. It was a matter of survival for those close to power. Within the harem lived Queen Tiye, distinct from the earlier and more famous Tiye of the 18th dynasty, a secondary wife, not the great royal wife, and therefore not the mother of the designated heir. Her son, Pentawr, stood outside the clear line of succession. For Tiye, the future was a narrowing corridor. When Ramesses III died, her influence would likely vanish. Pentawr's life itself might be at risk. The only way forward was radical, dangerous, and irreversible. What followed was not a sudden act of violence, but a carefully constructed plot. Tiye recruited allies from within the palace administration, officials, military officers, scribes, and even members of the magical establishment. Love, loyalty, resentment, and ambition intertwined. The conspirators exploited the very structure of the harem, its privacy, its ritual authority, its access to the king. Magic was invoked, wax figurines prepared, spells recited. In the Egyptian worldview, magic was not superstition. It was a technology of power, as real and consequential as a dagger. At the heart of the conspiracy lay a single goal: remove Ramesses III and place Pentawr on the throne. The timing may have been deliberate, possibly coinciding with a major religious festival when normal routines were disrupted and the king's movements more predictable. The precise mechanics of the attack long remained uncertain. Ancient sources are evasive, almost reluctant to describe the moment when divine kingship failed. For centuries, historians debated whether the plot succeeded. The trial records clearly show that a conspiracy existed and that it was punished with extraordinary severity, yet they stopped short of explicitly stating that the king was killed. Only in the modern era did the body itself speak. CT scans of Ramesses III's mummy revealed a deep cut across the throat, severing vital structures. The wound was fatal. The king had not merely been threatened, he had been murdered. The aftermath unfolded not as chaos, but as procedure. A special tribunal was convened, composed of high-ranking officials empowered to investigate, judge, and punish. Their findings survive in a document known today as the Papyrus Judicial of Turin. Its tone is chillingly clinical. The accused are listed by name and title. Their crimes are summarized. Their fates are recorded with a restraint that only heightens the horror. Some conspirators were executed outright. Others were forced to take their own lives. Several officials were mutilated, ears and noses cut off, before being sent into exile. The punishments were not merely retributive, they were symbolic. To mutilate a man's face was to destroy his social identity and his prospects in the afterlife. Justice, in this context, was inseparable from cosmic restoration. The crime had disrupted the universal order. The response had to be absolute. Pentawr's fate stands apart. The papyrus does not describe his execution directly. Instead, it suggests that he was left to take his own life. This euphemism has fueled centuries of speculation. Was it suicide, under duress, a ritualized death meant to avoid the pollution of royal blood, or something more ambiguous? Whatever the mechanics, Pentuer did not survive the trial, and his memory was systematically erased. Names were power in ancient Egypt. To remove a name was to annihilate existence itself. What of Ta? She too disappears into silence. The records condemn her actions but offer no emotional commentary. There is no attempt to understand her fear or her desperation, and yet from a human perspective, her motives are tragically comprehensible. She was a woman navigating a system that gave her influence only through proximity to male power. When that proximity threatened to vanish, she acted with the tools available to her: alliances, secrecy, and the manipulation of belief. The murder of Ramesses III did not bring renewal. His successor, Ramesses IV, inherited a weakened state. The 20th dynasty staggered on for a few more decades, but the age of great new kingdom pharaohs was over. The conspiracy had exposed a truth that could not be carved away with chisels or concealed beneath ritual language. The palace itself was no longer secure. The divine aura of kingship had cracked. In the end, the Harem conspiracy forces us to confront a deeper question. How does a civilization built on order respond when disorder comes from within its most sacred spaces? The Egyptians answered with trials, punishments, and the careful recording of guilt. Yet the very existence of those records is an admission of failure. The king had been vulnerable. The body of the god had bled. When we listen closely, across 3,000 years, we hear not only the voice of the state condemning treason, but the quieter echoes of human fear and ambition. The harem was not merely a backdrop for intrigue. It was a crucible where intimacy and power fused, where personal survival collided with cosmic ideology. And in that collision, a pharaoh died, not on the battlefield, not at the hands of foreign enemies, but in the shadows of his own household.